Record. Hey, everybody, Economic Ninja here. I hope you're doing great. We were going to talk about gold today. We're going to talk about central banks buying gold. We're going to talk about the Brics nations. We're going to talk about France. We're going to talk about everything. Guys, for multiple days now, the price of gold has settled over $2,000, a very important psychological marking spot for so many retail investors and countries. This is a big deal. We have so much going on in the world. I want to share a screen with you real quick and share some of my thoughts. Check this out. When we're just looking at stories, I'm looking at this. Central banks gold buying spree, implications for the global economy. Then you come over here to Reuters, gold rallies to one-year peak as economic worries mount. Now, guys, we know that so much is happening with China, now with France. We're now going to bring you some information about Malaysia and India, things like that. Guys, I brought on today Michael Wood from Reyna Gold. And the reason why I brought him on is he lives in Hong Kong, and he is experiencing the de-dollarization right now, the boots on the ground kind of feeling, and he runs a gold exploration company. So there probably isn't anyone better to talk about this than him right now. Michael, how are you doing?
Good, Ninja. Great to be here.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on. Before we started the interview, I literally, you're all, what are we going to talk about today? And I said, I want to talk about Brics and stuff like that. And you just started going off. So I'm just going to let you literally go. Start talking to me because I had to stop you and go, we got to start the interview. What's going on right now in Hong Kong? What is the sense that you're getting as far as the world's economy is literally splitting in two?
Yeah, no. I mean, this is a great topic, Ninja, and I think great to get out to your listeners who probably get more to kind of mainstream and American narrative. And I think there's a big movement globally to get away from the dollar, and this is really accelerating pretty quickly. And there's a big summit in August, the BRIC summit, where it's expected there's going to be an announcement around a BRIC currency of some form. Um, but the movement away from dollar in trade is escalating pretty quickly, and we've seen like a lot of it came. A big catalyst was the Ukraine conflict, where the Russians all of a sudden had to move away from USD. So then they started selling all their energy, oil, nat gas, basically in RMB to China. Before that, for example, Saudi Arabia was the biggest supply of oil to China. Russia's now overtaken it because they're selling in RMB. So now there's a lot of pressure on Saudi to sell it in RMB, and that's why you're getting all these headlines. And a really, I think, critical thing that I'm not sure it was really brought up too much in the US was that China just brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The whole petrodollar was formed on the concept: we, America, will protect you, Saudi Arabia, from Iran as long as you sell your oil in USD. Right now, Saudi Arabia doesn't need US protection anymore. Iran and Saudi are back on a friendly relationship. So it really seems that Saudi is coming to move away from the US dollar, and it's basically going to be the end of the petrodollar. I mean, just some high level numbers, Ninja. I was reading an article earlier. The estimate is if this happens, it will take away about $1 trillion a month of USD demand. $1 trillion a month just from the oil trade. Right, that's a massive amount of demand for USD evaporating overnight. So oil is one aspect, but there's loads of things we can talk about. It's not just oil. You've seen Brazil come out recently. You've seen France starting to sell natural gas to China in RMB. You've seen BHP Billiton start selling iron ore to China in RMB. Everybody is starting to do it. So it's escalating, and definitely from the Chinese side, and where I live in Hong Kong, it's very open. Like China's number one economic goal, and has been now for multiple years, is to get away from the dollar. For a long time, their number one economic goal was urbanization, population, employment growth. They had the Chinese economic miracle. They brought about 850 million people out of poverty, but now they've urbanized. They've improved the living standard of the vast majority of Chinese. And now they want to get away from the dollar. They know they have a number of weaknesses. Dollar dependence is one, energy dependence is another. And then we can touch on a little bit like this whole semiconductor story. That's a kind of peripheral thing, but the US definitely highlights it a lot. But they've been building up their own semiconductor industry as well, pretty extensively in the last few years.
You literally gave me so many things to think about right now because you're right. China's been buying up all the 200 millimeter parts and equipment to make semiconductors around the world. That's really hurting our economy or our semiconductor industry. Uh, Saudi Arabia, you talked about how the US used to protect them. I remember when they brokered a deal with Russia a couple of about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when they actually set up a deal with Russia that Russia would supply them with military equipment and military training. I identified that as all of a sudden Russia is going to protect them. Man, you're giving me so many things to think about. What do you think is the greatest? Well, here, let's start here. You're in Hong Kong. What are your thoughts about China right now is pressing Taiwan? They are literally flying jets into their space. They're pushing ships closer to the island. And at the same time, France's president is literally boots on the ground in China. What are you seeing there as far as the pressure that China is exerting on Taiwan? Because they've said before, they're going in to take that country, whether it be by force or peacefully. What is the feeling in Hong Kong about all this?
The feeling in Hong Kong is this is just a military drill. People do military drills all the time. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Taiwan. It's basically a big mountain. There's three beaches in Taiwan, right? So actually, an interesting stat: when the US were looking at invading Japan in World War II, they assessed using Taiwan as a base, right? And they realized actually it's such a hard place to invade. We better just go straight to Japan. So I think any kind of like Chinese invasion would be a obliteration. And
Okay.
what does China really want out of Taiwan? I think probably the main thing is semiconductors. Like it makes no sense to invade Taiwan to get semiconductors. I mean, interestingly, I saw the other day Warren Buffett sold all of his Taiwan semiconductor stock. I was looking at it after that. Actually, TSMC, the company, they've had negative earnings now for the last 3 quarters, right? So
Yes.
suddenly, this great company, because China no longer buys from them, is hemorrhaging money. China's been building its own semiconductor industry, and I've heard like literally they go to Taiwan and they say to the top semiconductor engineers, what's your salary? Okay, we'll triple that. Come to China and work for our companies, and they go right. These people all speak Mandarin. They got roots in China, so the main thing they want is the semiconductor industry. It doesn't make any sense to go in, and invade Taiwan to get that. It would just be obliteration, and they're not going to get the industry. The island will just get blown up. I, I think the view in Asia is it'd be people would be shocked if there was a military invasion of Taiwan.
Gotcha. So it almost seems like pressure being put on them in so that hopefully China, they're looking at possibly a peaceful transition and being able to take over that country, not through military force. But you're right. I'm actually about to start doing videos on the semiconductor industry and how the pressure that China really wants the infrastructure that's sitting there. And so they don't want to destroy it. Like you said, they don't want to blow it up. They want the infrastructure, the factories, all of everything's in place. And China knows how big of a deal. If they control the semiconductor industry, they will literally control the world right now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's way
Oh,
easier to build their own industry rather than go and invade Taiwan. Way easier.
yeah. So now, as of the recording of this video, and I can't show the Zoom is of course hiding my tabs. The the gold industry is going a little nuts. Exploration stocks are doing pretty well. Junior miners, they're doing well because everyone's expecting the Fed to pivot. I believe that we're not going to see the Fed stop raising rates anytime soon just because the rates aren't at or above the actual inflation rate. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And then look, the gold market's been having a great run, and there's many factors, and we can touch on that shortly. But I think like the whole banking crisis that we just had, like Credit Suisse, one of the biggest financial institutions in the world, just went bust. This is a big event. Silicon Valley Bank was a substantial bank, I think the third biggest bank in US history to go bust. So, we've had some major issues, and it seems already rates are too high, right? For the amount of debt we have, they've raised rates so high. I mean, like personally, I look at the 2 year Treasury. I follow what Jeffrey Gundlach says. He says like, don't, the Fed just copies a 2 year, and look at the 2 year. It's collapsed from like 5% to about last time I looked, it was 3.7. So that's pricing in multiple Fed cuts, and I think that maybe they're going to raise one more time to save face, and then start cutting pretty hard later in the year. But it seems like the bond market is pricing in multiple cuts. Good for gold.
Gotcha.
But I think, and we can touch on it, I think there's a lot bigger factor at play in the gold market, and that is like global demand for gold. And we're just looking at the monetary policy aspect. But I think a lot of the reason why the Brics want to get away from the dollar is because at the moment, the US monetary policy is their monetary policy. When they're reliant on having to buy dollars to buy oil, they're dependent on US monetary policy, and they don't want to be. They want to be dependent on our own monetary policy. A lot of these emerging market countries have suffered in the last couple of years when US have been raising rates, when their economies have been in a bad shape, and they didn't want it to be happening. And that's also been a renewed reason why they want to get away from this dollar dependence and the need to be buying dollars to buy commodities and all kinds of other products that they trade in.
Yeah, now we've talked about this before, and we were speaking about it this morning before the interview. That really the yuan, there's a portion of it that is already convertible into gold. So it seems like the Chinese want to build trust. I'm curious how much of that's being converted into gold right now. We just really don't know the numbers, but we do know that central banks like China is buying gold, Russia's buying gold, and tons of other central banks are buying gold. But you brought up earlier something really interesting, and it does have to do with the yuan, technically, because India is such a big trading partner and is literally a partner in Brics with China. India and Malaysia did something. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was quite big news in Asia. I don't think it really made the headlines in the West. India and Malaysia now started trading in Indian rupees, right? So they ditched the dollar, and now their trade is predominantly in rupees. So two big major Asian countries moving away from the dollar, nothing to do with China, right? So it's not just China. I think China gets a lot of headlines, but a lot of these countries, they don't want to. And you got to understand this if you're a foreign country. The way they've lived for the last 20, 30 years is they had to buy US dollars to buy oil, to buy semiconductors, to buy clothes, whatever, and they don't like that. They're like, well, look, why can't we just buy oil in ringgit or rupees? So that's where they would like to get to, and
Yeah.
they feel there's some momentum now in this move away, and it's very interesting for global markets, right? Because the dollar has been so dominant for so long, and we're also used to it. But if there is a fundamental change coming, it's going to be a real shock to the global financial system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Why did you move to Hong Kong?
Oh, well, actually, I went there to study ninja. I went there to do an MBA many, many years ago, and I've stayed. But I love living in Asia. I think
Yeah.
it's culturally quite different. I'm British originally, but a big thing for me is a tax system. In the Western system, you're giving half of your money to the state. In Hong Kong, there's no capital gains. There's no inheritance tax. Corporation tax is 8.5% or 16%. Income tax is 15%. It's a completely different tax dynamic. And for people like me that are relatively young trying to build up wealth, it's
Yeah,
so advantageous to
very
be in a tax
interesting.
system like that.
It's funny because we've seen that through countries as they build up and then they collapse. One of the factors is an overtaxation. And I remember, America has just been building up higher and higher taxes. And I mean, shoot, we didn't even have income tax about a little over 100 years ago. And it just seems like the more the countries tax the people, the worse it gets. Now, let's talk about your company. Why? And we've talked about this before, but I think it's very fascinating because you have a company that's a Reyna Gold that's traded in Canada, right on the Canadian Stock Exchange. You have an OTC ticker in America, but you're headquartered or you work out of Hong Kong. Why is that?
Yeah, really, I guess I'm a tax refugee, Travis. I've been there now 13 years and run things out of Hong Kong. But, I think the key thing is we have good geologists in Mexico on the ground. And, I'm a finance guy. I'm blessed that my company has really world-class geologists in Mexico doing the exploration work. So that's the way we operate, and it's great to be in that situation. Um,
Because you have Peter McGaugh on the team, correct?
yeah, exactly. So I
Okay.
have Dr. Peter McGaugh, who's a world-famous geologist, Dr. Tony Lungo again, a world-famous geologist. We have great geological team. And my job is the capital market side of things. I'm focused on raising the capital, marketing the story, and really nowadays you can do that really from anywhere. A lot of it is online. So I'm actually in the US right now, meeting some investors here, but I travel quite a bit, and but home is in Asia.
Yeah, this is another question I wanted to ask you because as of the recording of this, I'm showing it on the screen. Reyna Gold sort of on a tear right now. And do you have any idea? You have some news that came out, and I don't know why this is going on. It's some pretty heavy volume, but I'm seeing some volume picking up in gold stocks, in gold exploration stocks, things like that, because of the things you and I were talking about. What are you attributing this to right now?
Yeah, and like we're the bottom end of the market, Travis. We're an explorer. Our market cap is in the region of $10 million. Company specific, we had what we call discovery hole. We hit 60 meters of 1.5 grams of gold last year. That's a big block of gold, right? So we know
Gotcha.
we have a big block of gold. We've done a lot of scientific work around that. And now we're recommencing drilling with follow-up drilling around that. So people that have been following the story are excited. We just put out 2 days ago with mobilized drilling. Yeah, you can see there. And then we confirmed on Tuesday the rig is turning. So I think
Okay.
people that are very close to the story are excited and following and understand we've got some great targets following up from this already substantial drill hole. But then specifically the gold market, the producers now making a lot of money. Gold has been hovering, like you say, now over. We had the highest quarterly end to a quarter in history at the end of Q1, the highest monthly end.
Yeah.
We stabilized above 2000. The gold producers are making a lot of money. And the sector has been really out of favor for a long time. So there's been a lot of underinvestment in the sector. But now the big guys are making good money again. They're going to start reinvesting into smaller companies like ours. They need to buy more gold reserves. So they've been depleting their gold reserves they have on their balance sheets. And now they're starting to make good cash flow again. They're going to start to invest into companies like Reyna Gold to get more ounces of gold in the ground on their balance sheets.
Gotcha. Now, I've disclosed before that I own a position in Reyna Gold. I've also got options. I've been working with you for quite a while, and your team actually, because there's like a family of people, business partners that have multiple companies. And I've explained this before when exploration companies are trying to build that map and hit those drill holes and build a map and showing where the gold is, where the gold isn't, or whatever other minerals. Have you had some points where the map is starting to get bigger, or where are you at right now in the grand scheme of things as an exploration company? Are you working towards a resource report? Are you trying to start to market for another company to come in and help you get the gold out? Are you looking for an acquisition? What's sort of like the thinking, like the higher up thinking right now with your exploration company?
Yeah, good question, Ninja. And this discovery hole, 60 meters of virtually 1.5 grams of gold. And we've done a lot of follow-up work around that. And we've shown an extension to, we believe, the structure hosting that gold of about 1 kilometer in length, up to about 200 meters in depth, and up to about 600 meters of width, which is substantial. And now we started drilling again to test that. Now, if our thesis is right and that is all a gold body, that's a substantial amount of gold. So that's now at the stage we're at in that company. We're drill testing that thesis to see if that's correct. And if it is, then we've identified a good ore body there. And then we'll start to move to the stage where we start to put a resource on that. Yeah. So
Gotcha. And which project was that last big hole that you were talking
La
about?
Gloria. La Gloria
La
project,
Gloria.
that one. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. So this one right here. Okay. So now let me ask you this too, something that people might not understand about exploration companies. Some companies in the past have spun off, right? They have one project that produces more than others. And what happens is like all of the attention goes onto one project, and these other ones have still they're very viable. They're marketable, but some companies spin them off. Have you ever seen that happen, or could explain why a company would do that? I'm not saying you would do that, but just to be able to bring the listener some information and what corporate heads think about when they're dealing with junior mining companies and exploration companies.
Yeah, definitely. It's very common. And if we start to define what we're hoping to show actually, Ninja, in this stage is actually multiple ore bodies on a Gloria property. And if we start to define that, then yeah, we'll really focus all our capital into that and advancing that towards becoming a mine. And it's very capital intensive. So we won't be allocating capital elsewhere. So at that point, yeah, we might look to spin off some other projects to people that want to start allocating the capital, and we keep a stake in that project and they put in the capital to advance it. So yeah, it's very common in the industry that happens. Once you make a big discovery, you focus on that discovery from your company perspective.
Perfect. See, I want to explain. I wanted you to explain that to people because, and that is where we use the term carrying paper sometimes. Because a company, let's say, like Michael says, there's an amazing opportunity here. Let's focus our money here, so we're not wasting it on the others. We know what we've got here, but these other projects are still very viable. Let's spin this off or allow another exploration or junior mining company to take this over. We'll hold back some ownership in that. So is there anything else you could add to that to show people this is what some corporate executives are always looking at to do to make sure these properties that they already have money in aren't going by the wayside?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really capital allocation, right? So you as an executive, you want to be allocating your dollars where you're going to get the best return on investment. And once you've made a discovery and you start to advance that towards a mine, the return on the investment becomes substantial. My company's valued about 10 million today. If I can produce a multi-million ounce discovery, my company could be worth in the region of kind of $500 million to a couple of $1 billion, right? So a big re-rating. And so I will allocate all my capital to that. I won't be allocating the capital to Aldo Asno or one of my other projects.
Yep.
So at that point, I would say, okay, look, I'm open to doing a deal with somebody else who might, be in an earlier stage and want to apply the capital to that, and I keep a stake in the project, but they bring in the capital to advance the property. So yeah, it's really looking at return on investment of your dollars that you're allocating to put to work.
It's so interesting to me because there's so many different dynamics of an exploration company, because you have the need for a company to have multiple properties because they have a better chance of being able to drill one of those properties and find something. But then you also have to remember too that this is all hinged on the price of gold, silver, and whatever metals they're looking for. So that's another dynamic, because the company itself, your company, along with everyone else, has been in a really rough patch for like the last year and a half, 2 years at least, right?
Yeah, exactly. Really, since last April, actually, it's basically 12 months. That stock was $35, $40 stock last April, and we collapsed last summer. The whole risk, if you remember that the main market went, the gold market went, and everything in the exploration space really went, apart from a few like standout names. So look, yeah, exactly. We're looking at capital allocation, and once you get, and I think you touch on it, and when the companies start out, we often start out with like 3 or 4 projects and we'll focus on one. If that doesn't work out, we move to the second, etc. So you've got multiple projects to test. But we're fortunate at Reyna Gold. Our Gloria project is going really well. So we're at a point now where I think we are just purely focused on that, and most likely will do for the next few years.
Wow.
But it's an interesting dynamic in the sector, yeah.
It is. There's a lot to it. Well, Michael, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to put in your information in the pinned comments if they want to take a look at your website. And I thank you again for sponsoring the channel. Everything you've done has been just so amazing. I really appreciate it. And can't wait to have you on again.
No, great, Ninja. No, likewise, you do a great job getting out a very different message to people, giving them different insights and thoughts. And yeah, no, great to be part of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, with that being said, guys, I thank you so much for being here. The Economic Ninja is out.